Good afternoon. Welcome to the weekly livestock market update. I'm your host, Meghan Grebner, with us as always to talk all things markets, University of Missouri's Scott Brown. Good afternoon, Scott.
Good afternoon, Megan.
Our program this week is brought to you by the Feedstuff Finder from the University of Missouri. Feedstuff Finder was developed by the University of Missouri Extension with funds provided by the North Central Extension Risk Management Education Center and the USDA's National Institute of Food and Agriculture. You can check it out by opening up our newsletter every Saturday morning and clicking the link there. All right, so we're going to talk some demand this week. Retail prices, consumer sentiment. We'll preview a little bit of next week's cattle on feed numbers. But to kick things off, let's recap what was a week on the cattle markets that really could be probably described with like the fire emoji. It's been a really impressive week in some places.
Yeah, so Megan, absolutely. Starting on the cattle side, so live fed cattle 270 higher this week. I see average of nearly a buck 88 on fed steers, which is get pretty lofty levels, 2365, 100 above last year at this time. So higher prices. When you look at feeder cattle markets, they were also steady to $5 higher this week. On the futures side, we did see April live cattle futures contracts close down 35 cents. The April feeder contract was also down $1.80. Choice box beef higher this week, up nearly $4.50. That puts it nearly $26 above where it was a year ago. On the hog side, cash barrels and gilts 50 cents higher this week. The April lean hog futures contract was up $2 and a nickel. And we also saw the pork cutout value up nearly $1.15 this week. Interestingly enough, loins, butts, picnics, and ribs actually led the way, despite the fact we always talk about hams and bellies being important.
Definitely interesting watching what's happening on both the cattle and hog side recently. There's really been some significant gains, and it's nice to see that cash hog market start to find a little bit of support and a little bit of positive news there.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's putting producers in a much better position than maybe we would have thought just a couple of months ago.
Let's take a look at slaughter numbers as we take a look on both the cattle and hog side of things, kind of a different direction as you're looking at where those are happening.
Yeah, so if you look at what USDA said on the cattle side for the week ending March 16th, a run of 601,000 head, Megan, this week. That's 18,000 head more than a week ago, but down 27,000 from where we were a year ago. This week on the hog slaughter side, a run of 2.471 million head of hogs this week. That's 15,000 more than last week, but down 24,000 from where we were a year ago.
Taking a look, demand is kind of our focus this week. Let's start first, retail prices. As you take a look at the beef side of things, definitely still seeing some stronger prices on the retail front.
That's right. We're not backing down. So maybe the news here is, not a lot higher than where we've been of late is what's going on. You look at the overall food CPI for just a second, and it was 1% above where it was a year ago. So we're slowing the inflation we see in food prices generally, but we sure haven't turned it down. The beef retail price is definitely similar here in that it was an $8.08 choice beef retail price for February, basically unchanged from a year ago, but 6.5% above where it was last year, and almost 34% above where it was in 2019.
Is there some nervousness about how high beef prices could go, knowing we're still short supplies, knowing we're going to get tighter in terms of numbers, and how long can consumers hold on to continue to pay these higher prices at the store?
So my view, that is the thing I'm watching most carefully that could take the wind out of the sails of higher cattle prices here at the end of the day. However, when we look at the demand side thus far, Megan, I'll say I don't think we've seen a whole lot of slowdown. consumers seem willing to purchase at these higher prices. I think low-income consumers are looking for alternatives. When you look at ground beef prices that continue to march higher, that idea of maybe do I buy down, I think gets more difficult. And maybe that's where we get some switching. I think restaurants, again, are slow to change the menu, and those that feature beef will continue to do so. But if we were to talk about the economy slowing, consumer debt is still pretty large. Credit card debt remains large. I mean, those are things that we have to keep watching. And if we see switching, I worry about then how long does it take to draw consumers back to those beef prices.
Not seeing the same story on pork prices, but I think that's not necessarily a negative story if we're talking about prices not changing up or down.
Yeah, so we've been fairly flat, I think, on consumer pork prices of late. The pork retail price for February, $4.76. That was just a penny below where it was 1 year ago. It's 3 pennies less than it was in January of this year. So really not a lot of change. And when you look at pork retail price relative to that 2019 average, 24% higher. So where we talk about beef being 34, pork only being 24, I think that spells the difference. So for me, pork chops, boneless chops continue to be the one of interest. When you look at February relative to January, we're down 3.2% in boneless chop prices. I think that's where the pork industry can help itself the most of figuring out how to drive demand for some of the other cuts beyond your favorite of bacon.
I don't know. I'm pretty big fan of pork chops too. I mean, like, it's a good pork chop on the grill is a delicious meal in itself.
So absolutely, yet we seem to not be able to get that across to some consumers today about how good of an experience a good boneless chop could be. So I'm with you about that. Now, how do we get consumers as a whole to go out and want more pork chops? Let's put them on the grill this summer.
I remember as a kid, one of my favorite things was my grandpa and my dad used to grill for the local co-ops, and they do butterfly chops on the big open like charcoal grill, and it was my favorite time of year when this because all of the leftovers would come home, right? And so like you'd have pork chop sandwiches, and it was just fantastic on the grill.
Yes. Yes.
Go find a pork chop. Go support a local FFA chapter grilling at your local grocery store pork chop sandwiches for lunch.
Exactly. That's a good opportunity for everyone.
All right, let's talk consumer sentiment as we take a look at March's numbers. A little bit of a decline this month.
A little bit of decline. You know, we fell 0.5%. Is what the preliminary March numbers tell us relative to February. I will say, don't forget, we had some pretty strong growth in consumer sentiment. So taking a sideways here for a month maybe is not all bad, because when you look at year over year, we're still more than 23% above where we were a year ago in terms of consumer sentiment. So hopefully that message helps us with meat demand as well, as consumers seem less concerned about where the economy's headed than maybe we did 6 or 8 months ago.
We're going to preview cattle on feed and livestock slaughter. I do want to talk quickly. We heard that the Perry plant in Iowa was shuttering its stores this week. That's going to happen later this year. As we look at these types of closures, we know we have the sow facilities in Missouri from another company shutter last year. What does this mean in terms of processing, and is that also a risk management thing that producers need to think about as we're watching some shifts in these plants?
So I don't think you can not take a look. And I will say, I don't care if we're talking hogs or cattle. We always want more shackle space, not less. And losing shackle space is never a good situation. Maybe it's absolutely fine here in the short run, and that we'll have plenty of capacity. But at some point, we're going to want to build the herd again, and how much can we build before then we run up against shackle constraints, and that's the concern here of not so much the short run, it's the long run. And very definitely on the pork side, we're seeing poor economics translating across the industry with some downsizing that maybe otherwise would not have occurred.
Before I let you go today, preview of cattle on feed and livestock slaughter. What are you watching? I mean, I think I can guess, but what are you watching in next week's reports?
So I know you won't be surprised for me to be talking about what did we really place here in February. We will have an extra day here, but in February because of leap year. But January was so cold. There was a lot of discussion about how much placements were going to be down in January. Pre-report relative to what we actually got in January, pre-report would have suggested a lot lower placements. How does that all balance now that we look at what we're going to get from February next week? I think that's the key part of this. And, by the way, I want to keep watching beef cow slaughter. You and I talked about beef cow slaughter being down in January when we got livestock slaughter last month. Is it 2 months in a row, or was January down because it was also bitterly cold for a period of time as well?
And the last thing it is right now is bitterly cold in recent weeks.
It's a nice spring week again, right?
I guess I say that where we are. I mean, there was like 42 inches of snow outside of Boulder. I think I saw on a map today from the system that moved through. So hopefully everybody's digging their way out if you're covered in snow in those areas.
For sure. And let's hope we get lots of good moisture this year and get some forage supplies built back for the cattle side of the industry.
Definitely. Scott, it's always great to see you. We will check in with you next Friday.
Sounds good, Megan.
So have our weekly livestock market update delivered to your email box every Saturday morning. Go to brownfieldagnews.com. You can also submit questions and comments. And to check out what happens, or for a rundown of what happens every day in the commodity markets, make sure to check out John Parkin's Market Minute. Have a great weekend. I'm Meghan Grebner for Brownfield.